Thank you so much, Professor Tourage, for this wonderful, very interesting discussion and the presentation. We just opened the podium for question answer. As I mentioned in the chat, either visually raise your hand if you have a question or write your question in chat. We already have one question from Negar. Thank you so much for your insightful presentation. I was wondering if you link the women poets reciting their poem as going beyond the pleasure principle?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and you know, that's my clue to say I don't know how to answer that question. Really, I'm very familiar with pleasure principle, but in order to answer, to do justice to the answer, it needs a whole lot of talk. It is based on pleasure principle as opposed to other principles such as performance or others. Yes, short answer to Negar is actually yes, it does go beyond pleasure principle, or and pleasure principle, if you're not familiar with, is a dialectical interplay between pain and pleasure. And that's what I was trying to work with here as well. A dialectical, what's taking place here is not exactly submission to the regime, and it's not exactly liberation. It's somewhere in between. It's submission and liberation. You cannot have submission unless you have liberation, and you cannot have liberation unless except and only except when you have liberation. Thank you, Negar. I don't think I did justice to answer your question, but that's a great question.
The presentation was really so insightful. I loved it. And if you have written more about this subject, I would love to read it, or if you have any.
Yeah, it's coming actually. It's coming. I mean, it was translated ably by by Elahé, who's actually here. I'm going to post the Farsi version of it. If you just click there, it's on the chat. That's a Farsi version. You could. But it's a translation of the English. The English one is coming in June, and if you email me, I would be happy to send you a copy, because the English version, and just to get some feedback. Thank you.
Okay, anybody? Professor Fisher has a question. Would you please unmute yourself, Professor Fisher, and ask your question? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mahdi. That was really fascinating. I'm not a literary scholar, so this question might be sort of on the margins, but I'm fascinated by the sociological dimensions of the performance. And so as a way of opening that up, perhaps, one question might be, what do we know about how these poets are selected for this annual occasion? Are there earlier competitions? Are they coached in certain kinds of ways? What's the background to all of this?
You know, somebody who is familiar, maybe somebody who's here familiar with the process could help us. I have no idea. I have only worked with what is publicly available. But I can guess, as an educated guess, I'm pretty sure that these are vetted, carefully vetted. How they are chosen, I don't know. I don't know exactly how they are chosen, but they're not random people. They're chosen, yeah.
Of course. I mean, that whole process of vetting, of finding them, and then of curating, as you put it, a very important term, curating the event, would be very interesting to unpack.
Yeah, but as you can see, it's highly engineered. Like, it's really just to the details. I think even the way they look is also significant. You know, like I think you can see it between 2008 and 2018. Like, these are, I mean, there has to be like a really pretty face. Aesthetics of it is really, because it's about performance, right? It has to be. You know, so if you are, anyways, I don't know. Thank you, Professor Fisher.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any question? Gita, would you please unmute yourself, ask your question? Thank you.
Hello, Professor Tourage. It's great to have your presentation here. I am thinking about the couple of thoughts came up for me. First, going back to, I'm old enough to remember Shah's regime and the kind of curated, very, as you put it, engineered performances that were put on similar to these by, sometimes younger artists, younger poets, and they would present their poetry in praise of, Shah and the Vatan and etc. And I'm thinking, how would we, if we think about it within a political regime that is, if we think of these performances or these presentations within in the context of a political regime and its propagandistic kind of methodology, how might we read these performances differently? Second thing that came up for me was your very provocative idea about agency, and that we should not perhaps think about agency only in terms of oppositional opposition, or within the context of within a liberatory context or emancipatory context, which has been the case in much of feminist theory. This is the way that we have thought about agency. So I take your point, and I think it's a very insightful point. But then, the sort of activist in me, the social justice activist in me, is thinking, so what is the implications of that in terms of movement building, and in terms of the kind of very oppressive gender politics that we see in Iran. So so these were just thoughts. I would appreciate any insights you could offer on them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I wish I had great words of insight to offer, but I really don't. I can just say a few words about it, because these are all things that we have to grapple with. Yes, there's an ethical question. Sure, they are asserting their agency, they're gaining social power in their submission, but at the same time, they are being used by the regime, and they are supporting the regime and obstructing in other forms of movement, other forms of resistance. And I'm sure you're familiar with Sarah Ahmed, is that Sarah Ahmed? Yes, book on piety movement in Egypt, in the mosques, women piety movement in Egypt, and she pushes against this, that transgression is not the answer. There are other forms of agency especially after 40 odd years. After 40 odd years, we have prolonged situations of oppression. So to me, the way I look at it, Gita, is that tomorrow, inshallah, the Ayatollah Khamenei and regime are gone, and what are we going to do with this? With people who read poems in his praise and supported the regime. Another way of looking at it, and thank you for pointing that out, that this is not new. We had the same ones during Shah's time. And what happened? What did we do with the people after revolution when Shah was gone? And though anybody who has praised Shah, now there was a mark on them. So these are all questions to think about. I don't really have a good answer to it. And I just want to say that maybe there is no good answer. If you do have some insights, I would like to hear it, but I really don't have a good answer what to do with their support of the regime.
Gunha, would you please ask your question?
Thank you, Professor Talakani, and thank you, Professor Tourage, for your great presentation. Just to follow up on the issue of the agency, your critique on Western feminist conception of agency very much resonates that of Sabah Mahmoud's critique on the concept of agency. And quick look at your article, it contains a part about Sabah Mahmoud. And would you kind of differentiate your view with her view on agency?
Yes.
Or like,
yes. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for Guna. That's a very good question. And I mentioned Sabah Mahmoud, but Sabah Mahmoud is what's a polite way of saying kind of passé, you know, like she has been critiqued enough when she came along and said that, look, there are other forms of agency. Yes, but now we know that if we go that way and say there is a form of agency, we fall into this trap that we cannot criticize this. We cannot criticize conformists whatsoever because they become beyond reproach. Because who are you from outside to come and judge these people who are living under dictatorship? You know, to say why? That's the problem with that Sabah Mahmoud has been criticized. And I do point out in the English version when I mentioned her critique of her position and how it is not really it's not exactly applicable to this situation. Thank you, Gunha.
Okay, now Albert Mirkhand, you can.
Albert, please.
Yeah, Albert.
Okay, thank you. I just thought it was quite hypocritical of the leader to enable flattery or some sort of cult-like appreciation of his stance. You know, it's not really a part of Islam. And I saw it as objectification or sexualization of the females. This was what I personally interpret, and I've studied this historically. And this person, this is not really. I see it as a hypocrite. I don't see it as an Islamic leader like the revolution that's occurred in. And I just felt for the women that are trying to win his favors, like maybe become, you know, one of his concubines. You know how they do muta marriages or something.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I just.
Yeah, that's what I was. My very first slide PowerPoint is about that there is there's a libidinal investment in here. But back to what you were saying, yes, it is very hypocritical. He explicitly says, "Do not praise me. I don't like to be praised," which is the code word that, hey, praise me, but you know, not so openly. But here's the point. This Ayatollah Khamenei, you know, hypocrisy is probably least of his guilt. You know, he's like he's such a.
It's terrible what he did to.
Yeah. So hypocrisy is really at the bottom of all the wrong things that
he's tyrant.
He's doing and he's doing.
The hypocrisy.
Yeah. Thank you. But that's a good point. Thank you.
I appreciate you bringing up the point of the females trying to win his, you know, like the sexual innuendos and the forced veiling and taking away, you know, it was a very powerful presentation. I will certainly email you to get a copy of your article in English, as Farsi is hard for me to read. But دستون درد نکنه خسته نباشین.
خیلی ممنون. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, the libidinal investment is definitely there. There is here it's symbolic, but in many other cases, there's always a young woman and an older man who is powerful, either the ruler, Kim Il-jung, Gaddafi, and all those. And I don't know, Dr. Kohli, this is like an old trope that has been recycled many times. Thank you very much, Albert. I see Onaiza.
Onaiza, would you please unmute yourself?
Thank you. I'm actually currently exploring pre-modern Sufi poetry, and I understand that you've also written about that. So I'm wondering, how would you draw parallels to the homoerotic poetry in the Sufis, and how, say, for example, ones that I'm familiar with is Amir Khusro, for example, writing about his lover, who was his teacher, and how much did the power politics play into the pre-modern Sufi poetry? So that is one question. Another thing was that I found one thing you said very interesting, that the act of writing was unveiling. And I'm also currently exploring a Princess Zebunissa, the Mughal princess, and how she chose to win. And I wanted to draw more attention towards her intellect rather than her beauty. And again, I'm not quite sure if there's a question in that particular point, but I just saw some parallel comparison in agency. So
Yes,
and I would like it if you could make some comments on that, since my dissertation is going to be on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're on the right track. You don't need any comments, but yes, definitely, we have exact same thing here. I mean, if you talk to any one of these women, they will say, "Look, I have covered myself according to standards. I want to be taken seriously for my art, for my poetry," and certainly that's the case. But then, you know, the regime is using it using them in a way that they are objectified and sexualized, and at the same time they do sexualize and objectify the leader. So it is very much like that. Back to what Sufi poet is saying, that's the most important, the most interesting part of your question about Sufi poetry. It is the lineage of many of these poems, especially the one that we just listened to, goes back to they're using a specifically mystical Sufi poetry. You know, they're using Sufi poetry, Sufi language, and Sufi language is you know, whether, I don't know if Nasser Khosrow was really as much of a Sufi. He was certainly esoteric, but their language is very much ambiguous. You never know if it's a male lover, or is it a god, or is it or is it a real person? And here they do the same thing, because the leader says, do not look at me as an object of love. And it doesn't look like they're doing it, but they could hide behind the ambiguous language of mystical poetry. One important point about Nasser Khosrow, Rumi, Hafez, but Rumi especially, is that when they talk about the beloved, they specifically mean, and I don't want to open up a can of epistemological worm here, but I'll do it anyways. When pre-modern male Sufis talk about the beloved, they specifically mean male beloved. Yes, they talk about female love and all these things, and creative feminine and all these things, but here we have an example of a female poet objectifying a male person. That is, it's not entirely unique, but it is worthy of mention in itself. So it's not so sexist and so misogynist that someone like Rumi or Nasser Khosrow would have been.
So just adding to that, there's a lot of power politics in play here. So would there have been power politics in play in say Rumi's time, for him to be validated, yes, to be recognized through that association of romance or love, whatever?
Yeah. Even panegyric poems, right? Panegyric poems. I mean, we are not any better than I'm not trying to say that we are superior to them or anything. You know, the panegyric poems they wrote in praise of the leader, the ruler, the military ruler of the, I don't know, Bukhara or whoever they financed them, and in return they got money for it. The same thing as we apply for shirk money here from the government. You know, if you do not this is the politics of it. You cannot apply for whatever you want to write. You can apply, but they will not give it to you. They give to you, they judge what is your project about. Same thing, pre-modern leaders would look and say, what are you writing about? I will pay you money for this. And they would get the money, but they do their own thing as well. So even the panegyric poems would idealize the leader in a way that would be bigger than the leader himself. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we have a comment from Shirin. Would you please unmute yourself and share your comment with all of us, and Professor Tourage? It's very interesting comments. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry. I was traveling last night and I'm kind of dazed and confused. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. And I've enjoyed your series every time I've attended. Yeah, what amazing talk. I've done research on pro-Hezbollah women in my book and my articles. And what was always very interesting to me, someone asked, how are they selected? Oftentimes it's based on, a lot of these women are involved in cultural activism. So it starts out from being involved in cultural institutes that are funded explicitly or not by Beit Rahbari, by the Supreme Leader's office. And the other thing I think that we forget so much, for those of us that don't go to Iran, or if we do, we certainly don't go around this crowd, is that it is a performance. I mean, if you talk to these women, and I have, oftentimes their views and their critiques are not all that different from ours when it comes to the regime. It's just prestigious. It is so difficult for you to be selected to go into that space. And once you do, you're considered to be safe, you're okay. So you'll get invited into other spaces. And I don't want to narrow everything down to economics or money, but in a society where, what is it, like 70–80% of the universities are women, and they make up like 20% of the workforce. This is really, really important for women in terms of access, resources. And so one of the main things I've noticed during my interactions and interviews with women like this is that oftentimes they're actually very much so against the regime and anti-revolutionary. If you sit down and talk to them. And it's not all that surprising because, almost an exaggerated presentation of support for authoritarianism is another way of opposing it, of exposing how ridiculous it is too. But thank you. This is absolutely wonderful. I'm sorry, I'm tired. Otherwise,
no, thank you. That what a great point that you made. And that's why I pointed out that we need like an anthropological study, somebody following them to see what's their class background, what happens to them afterwards. We don't have any one of those. I only have what we see. But yeah, that is, what did you say at the end? I forgot. Just the very end.
They can be anti-regime.
Yeah, thank you. That's brilliant. Because when we think of subversion, resistance, we think of these, stormtroops rushing across the border. But in order for the regime or any system of dictatorship, any system of oppression to fall apart, you got to take it seriously.
That's right.
You take their claim seriously. You say, "Oh my God, you are the representative of the 12th Imam," and if you take it literally, you will see how ridiculous it becomes. I mean, we are laughing talking about it,
and it gets exposed, right? Because
yes.
I'm not sure. Do people watch this in Iran? Is it on TV?
I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. So imagine people watching this as well. I mean, I know there's a lot of jokes made about it in social media in the West, but people are also watching this. So in a way, what I want to say is it really is a performance of sorts. So you can make of it what you wish. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, performance is a key word. I mean, I probably should have frame my paper around performance itself. It's like a filmic performance. And just the way that if you look at a film, we don't think that, we know that this is a film.
I will forward some material that might be interesting for you.
Thank you.
Negar, I think that you have a good comment. Would you please share with Professor Tourage that you shared with us in chat?
Yes, sure. So I've written my comment, and I believe because it just came on, it was on the top of my mind, and I was thinking maybe this jouissance could be related to, linked to Maqam Fana Felhaq, because we were talking about mysticism as well. So if we take the supreme leader in these women's eyes as the haq, let's say, so now it can make more sense to me if we can link their presentation to jouissance and going beyond the pleasure principle. And I don't know, what do you think about that?
Well, you actually made me really happy. I was really reluctant because you know how it is in these presentations, you can't throw in too many jargons. And I was really hesitant to say anything about jouissance, even I had a different font in case I need to last minute bypass it. So I'm glad that it actually resonated with you. And that's a really good point. Same as pleasure principle. So yes, it is linked to this idea of fana, that once you obliterate yourself, what remains is something extra, something beyond, something excess of pleasure. And that's my point, that excess of pleasure, that excess goes beyond the limits of the session and the control of the regime. If you have any other comments, I would really love to hear it. Thank you, Negar.
Sure. Now, I guess it was Shireen who just commented about the fact that many women maybe think of it as like a maybe ladder for, I don't know, promotion in their careers maybe. But my experience of living in Iran, I've seen women, I've seen even in my experience at Allama Tabatabai University, I've seen my classmates that it wasn't like a career promotional thing. They were in love with the idea of the supreme leader. So we should also take this part into consideration as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I pointed that out, that there is a spiritual cleansing aspect to it that we cannot doubt. Yeah, definitely. There's a spiritual experience. And I know we all think, I don't know if we all, but I'm not speaking for everybody, but we kind of agree that this guy is really not worth it, but it doesn't matter. It is no different than a celebrity. We know the celebrity is fake, but if you ever see a celebrity in real life, you're thinking, oh my God, this is, you have a different experience. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Shahbaz, you had a comment, and I think that's a long comment. It's better that you unmute yourself and share your comment with us, with all of us.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Talahani, and thank you very much, Professor Tourage, for this very interesting talk. Well, I was wondering, we have already heard similar kinds of panegyric poems from men being recited for the supreme leader, and gestures of kindness such as giving rings as gifts to the poets have also been done before many times for men poets. Okay, in the films that you shared with us, the videos that you shared with us, the only feminine aspect that I found was the presence of women in them reciting the words. Otherwise, these poems could be recited by men. It was somehow really to me, it was, let's say, gender neutral maybe. I wonder if we could just see this as a conscious twist in the objectification of women to show gender equality in the eyes of the leader, who is at the same time a political leader and also a spiritual one.
Yes, yeah, and in fact, it is that at least appearance of gender neutral that allows these women to speak freely of love. Yeah, thank you. That's a really good observation.
Okay, I just want to say that I am very, very happy that part of this engaging discussion and also insightful talk that you have, Professor Tourage. And I don't know, do not see any hands or any chat, but I can see that the audience is still chatting with each other and engaging in discussion in the chat, which is really fabulous. Just I wanted to say thank you so much for this insightful, engaging talk, and thanks to all audiences who engage in the discussion and ask the question, give comments to us, and join us today. And please join me again, and appreciate and thanks Professor Tourage for this wonderful and insightful talk visually. And I just say that thank you, and pass to Professor Sandler. I just want to say that Professor Tavakkoli also joined us in the discussion. It's a great pleasure that having him in our discussion too. Okay, Professor Sandler, back to you.
So Azita, all I have to say is how pleased I started such a wonderful occasion, and it's so great to see Mahdi again, and also see new faces, I think, in the Zoom. So I can only say thank you for coming, and for your paper, which is always very. It makes you think. Yeah. Yes. And sometimes wonder what your
Professor Tavakkoli, would you please say something to us, some words at the end of the session?
Professor Tourage, thank you for your outstanding presentation, a paper that I had read, but unfortunately I was in a search committee meeting and I could not join, but I was seeing your visuals on the screen. This is an amazing presentation and requires to rethink some of the binary oppositions that we have, and you really articulated really well. And also the notion of subject, in a sense that we have the pre-modern woman poets usually were the objects of desire. Even when they wrote, they talked about their lovers. But here in this particular case, you have the formation of a modern subject or the poetry that very clearly is part of the modern or postmodern kind of poetic writing in Iran. And during the process that we were selecting poets for performance, I was amazed that some of the best poetry that women poets that I found, later on I discovered that they were citing poetry at the court of the supreme leader, and we decided not to invite them because it would have become a serious liability. But there are many outstanding poets who have been at the court, but that should not become a category for us to judge them and dismiss their creativity, their poetic creativity, and also their agency that transcends this sort of submission and resistance category.
Yeah, thank you very much. And finally, let me just thank everybody, Professor Sandler, who we were just, and when she was talking, me and her were laughing because we were smiling because she was my professor, undergraduate and graduate and PhD. Professor Tavakkoli, who is also was my Ustad during my PhD and my thesis committee, and Azita Talagani, that our colleague, and many other, all these interesting, thought-provoking, that really in comments and questions that enriches my paper. So thank you very much for having me, and thank you for listening to my talk.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and see you next week in our cinema presentation that we have. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye, everybody.